This is a tutorial that will take you through the basics of how to load in animated content into Vortals. Vortals does not allow you to animate content within the program. However, it does allow you to load in pre-animated content, but it requires a very specific process. This example will use Blender, but you can use pretty much any animation package available. I'm using Blender because it's free, but you could use something like Autodesk Maya or Autodesk 3D Studio Max or any number of different animation packages. So to start, what I'm going to do is add a mesh, and in this particular case it's going to be a sphere. Now to the sphere, there's a number of different ways that you can animate it within a 3D package, but for this to work in Vortals, you need to follow a very specific process. So what I'm going to do now is add an armature. Now in different packages this is called something else, like bones for example, but in Blender this is called armature. Now as you can see, once I've loaded it, it can be very difficult to actually see that bone or armature. And so what I'm going to do is come down to this button here, and I'm going to choose Viewport Display, and I'm going to choose In Front. And that then allows me to see this object in front of whatever it is that we are working with. So now what I want to do is actually attach somehow this sphere to the armature. Now there are a number of different ways to do it, but again, there's only one way that will really work within Vortals. So what we want to do is we want to select the sphere first, and then we want to shift select the armature. Now you can actually also do it in Blender, you can do it through here. So if I choose the sphere first and then shift select the armature, this is now the process you can follow. And then you can either press P, which will bring up a menu, or you can come up to Object and then choose Parent and then choose With Automatic Weights. Now again, there are many options within a 3D package. This is a very quick tutorial to take you through the basics of how to set this up. So I'm not going to explain all of these sort of extra options that you get, only to say that this is a quick way of doing it, and this will get you working within Vortals very quickly. So now what will happen when I select this armature and move it, the sphere itself will come with. And so that now lets me animate this armature and have the sphere follow. So that's pretty much what I'm going to do straight away. So if I move my slider down here, and I am currently in timeline mode, and I can just set a keyframe. So I choose auto keying, and if I move this around, it'll automatically set a keyframe. So I'm going to move into the Y-axis mode so I can see exactly where my sphere is placed. And I'm going to place it close to the origin on the Z-axis. And then I'm going to move this forward, let's say 30 frames. And I'm going to move the sphere across and then down. And then I'm going to move this, let's say another 10 frames across. And I'm going to move it across and then up. And then I'm going to move it back another 10 frames or so. And I'm going to move it across and down. And finally, I'm going to move to frame 70, and I'm going to shift it across. And so if we look at what we're actually doing, we're trying to create a bouncing ball. So if I play this back, you'll see it's kind of looking right, but pretty much a long way from being correct. So what we want to do now is move to the graph editor, select that, and then if we expand out our object, we'll hide the rotation and the scale lines using these little eyeballs over here, and we're going to choose Z location. I'll expand this up so you can see that better. And if we look at the Z location first, in fact I'll hide the other two for the moment, this is where your knowledge of physics might actually help you. So when you release a ball, it's going to fall and it's going to accelerate, and then as it hits the ground it's going to suddenly stop and change direction. And if you look at the path of this particular curve that we're looking at, this traces the path of the ball in the Z-axis. And if you look, it accelerates, but then it slows down, and then by the time it actually gets to the ground, it's going really slow for no apparent reason. So what we want to actually happen is this to accelerate and keep on accelerating until it hits the ground. And this is where your knowledge of physics is important, because that is actually something we call a quadratic equation. So here we choose quadratic, and you can see now the ball will accelerate down until it hits the ground. But you'll notice on the right-hand side, this has turned into something a little strange. So what's happened is we need to choose ease in and ease out. So down here there's easing, so we need to choose ease out, and that then creates the quadratic bounce, so to speak. So now it comes down, accelerates, and then hits the ground, and it bounces back up. And we also need to do the same over here for the last little bit. So we choose quadratic, and we choose our easing, and this time it should be easing in. So now we look at the ball, and we press play, and it's getting there. But now what you're seeing is that the ball seems to get faster and slower for no apparent reason. So what we need to do is turn off the Z location and look at the X location. And again, in the X location, we're seeing that random amounts of acceleration and deceleration happen, when in fact what we actually wanted is to stay constant. So what I'm going to do is delete these keyframes here. Oops, choose that again, delete keyframes. And I'm going to select the 2 remaining keyframes. I'm going to right click and I'm going to choose linear. Because in linear mode, this means that there is no acceleration or deceleration of the ball. So let's play that, and you can see now it's looking a little bit better. It's still not perfect, and one of the things about animation is you can spend many hours perfecting how it all works, changing your times, changing your keyframes. See, I think at the moment if I press here, it takes too long for the ball to fall and hit the ground, and you could actually work out exactly how long it should take based on how high it is and based on how long gravity would take to actually drag it down to the ground. But for the moment, I'm going to leave it at that. So now what we want to do is load this into Vortals. And so the way we need to do that is we need to export this system. So we come to File and we choose Export. And we choose FBX. And in FBX, we want to make sure that we have animation selected, and all of these animations are selected as exporting. And then we can give it a name. Let's give it Bouncing Ball 2, and I will export that. And so now that is exported and is ready to load into Vortals. So here is a bouncing ball I made earlier. Let's move it across so it's out of the way. Let's load in our 3D model, Bouncing Ball 2. And you'll notice it doesn't seem to exist, except actually it does, it's just scaled massively. So that's often what you'll find depending on the package that you're working with. The scale differences will mean that you need to be aware that sometimes it'll load really big or it'll load very small, just depending on what scale you were using originally. So now we're going to scale it down, and here is our animated bouncing ball that we just made in Blender. Now this tutorial is not designed to teach you how to animate. There are many excellent resources available that can take you through the process of animating. The purpose of this tutorial is to show you how to set up a system that will work as an animated object within Vortals. Here you can see a much more complex system than, say, the bouncing ball, which is an animated turtle that has many armatures and has been rigged very carefully to work with its animation system. You can export this as well through FBX and load it into Vortals, and this will play as an animated object. As I say, there are many excellent resources out there that will help you with your animation. In order to get this to play in Vortals, these are the steps that you have to follow.